Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to another Trainer's Talk. Today's one is going to be very special. I'm sitting in paradise with the one and only Ron Dekoven.
Thank you.
Thank you. And before we get started, I want to read off a couple of things. Ron is a barrister and a lawyer, and I want to read off a couple of things because the list is long. We won't go through all of it because I think it will be like the beginning of Star Wars where you see the credits and the story if we go through it all. But Mr. Dekoven was called to the bar in Illinois and New York in 1968 and 1980 respectively. In 1980, Mr. Dekoven became a partner at Sherman and Sterling in New York. He ran several of the firm's practices during that time, and then after moving to London in 2003, Mr. Dekoven became an associate member of the South Square Chambers and was permitted by the Bar Council to practice New York and U.S. federal law in chambers. In 2008, Mr. Dekoven, I'll go even through this, long story short, became a barrister and continued to practice law as a New York lawyer and an English barrister. And then when did you move to Calistoga?
2012.
2012. So in 2012, moved here, made this your primary residence.
Right.
And you are currently the CEO of Mylawyer and MyBarrister.
Right.
Right. And which are law tech firms, which we'll get to down the road.
Fair enough.
I know that is really brief, as long as your list is. So we'll start kind of from the beginning. You grew up in Chicago.
Yes.
And what year were you born?
1944.
Awesome. And so you've went from Chicago, you graduated from Stanford for your bachelor's, you graduated from University of Chicago for your law degree. So what from the Southside of Chicago, what did that give you growing up?
I think that the whole experience was fairly modest.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, that was a benefit. By virtue of not having a lot of things, I think it shaped my approach to life.
Yeah.
Which I'm happy about.
Yeah. And we've been training, I've been your personal trainer since kind of 2012 once you really moved here.
Yes. And
that has been a cool, I call you my brother from another mother. And so, we've been able to build a relationship within the training and we share stories of us growing up and things that we're doing now. And one of the reasons I wanted to interview you is that you're very humble about talking about your career and the different things you've accomplished. And I think, your story is a story that's worth hearing and seeing and maybe one day reading. And I know you're a big reader. Can you remember some stories that you have from when you were growing up when it came to books?
I don't know how it happened, but I was pretty young and I discovered that there was a library in my grammar school. Mm-hmm. And so I used to be allowed to go into the library mainly because I would finish my work relatively quickly. Uh-huh. And I think the teacher was happy to have me leave the room because otherwise I might have been a disturbance. So I would wander down the library. Yeah. And then I learned you could take books out of the library. Yeah. So I was probably, I don't know, maybe in the second grade.
Yeah.
And I started taking the books out. And I'm a fast reader. So on Friday, I would find as many books as I could carry.
Yes.
To take it home for the weekend. I wanted to make certain I had enough books. So I would then read them all weekend long, return them on Monday. And I discovered that there was a series about famous Americans as children.
Yes.
Mainly, of course, old white males who became president or the head of General Electric or something like that. And I loved those books.
Yes.
So I had put my pile together for the weekend, and I went up to check it out. And the librarian said, "You can't take those out." I was stunned. I said, "Why?" She said, "You can't possibly be reading all the books you take out." And I said, "Well, you can quiz me. Pick a book that I've checked out and ask me a question, because I've read every single one from cover to cover."
Oh my
and
gosh.
She looked back at me and she said, "Get out of here."
I mean, right there, you. It's funny, like in that story, you made an argument.
I did. I was getting ready.
You're getting ready for the big leagues, and you know, we'll kind of come back to Chicago because we'll kind of go in a little bit in order, and we'll jump into what got you out to Stanford.
Well, it is a bit of a story, but I will tell it to you.
Yeah.
So I hadn't been serious about school really until I went to college. You know, I don't want to blame the curriculum because it was probably also me.
Yeah.
But I had a half-assed approach.
Yeah.
So I realized that because of that, I couldn't apply to an Ivy League school. I didn't have an A or an A- average in high school.
Yeah.
So I only applied to the University of Illinois.
Yes.
And they had to accept you if you had a certain score on the ACTs.
Mm-hmm.
So I took the ACTs and I got a very high score.
Yes.
So not only did they admit me, but they made me a James Scholar, which was a real advantage because in those land-grant universities, the normal classes are enormous.
Uh-huh.
And the classes for James Scholars were limited in size, 15, 18 people.
Yeah.
And probably better professors, no TAs. So I was in the School of Engineering, and I had a perfect grade point because I was focused.
Yes.
But I felt that it wasn't the right place for me because to get an A in engineering drawing was really difficult, and I was compulsive. I had to have an A.
Yeah.
So if you had one erasure, that was a B. So you could be close to finishing the drawing with ink, and the nib of the pen could catch on the T-square. Then the ink goes underneath the T-square, and you're done. You have to start over.
Wow.
And a drawing can take hours.
Yes.
So I got an A in engineering drawing. But I thought, I just don't want to spend the rest of my life doing this. I didn't understand that isn't really what you do when you're an engineer.
Yes.
Especially given where I was in the development of engineering. I would have soon had, CAD drawings and whatnot. In any event, in Illinois, in order to change schools, you had to get the permission of the dean of the school you were in. So, and you had to bring your transcript. So I made an appointment with the dean of the School of Engineering. I brought my transcript. I was admitted in, and he said, "Mr. Dekoven, why are you here?" And I said, "Sir, I'd like to transfer I forgot where I told him I was going to transfer. He said, let me see your transcript. So I handed him the transcript. It's straight A's. He looks back at me and he said, I've never allowed a student with a perfect grade point to leave the School of Engineering, and I don't intend to start now.
Yeah.
So he hands me the transcript. I walk out and I'm stunned. How's that possible that he could do that? It just seemed like I was, in Russia. So I was kind of dazed, and I'm walking back to the fraternity house with this huge, well, it's not really a briefcase, it's really narrow, but it's the size of an engineering drawing. It's probably 5 by 4.
Yeah.
You can imagine what that's like in the Middle West in the winter. It's like a sail.
Yes, it's exactly a wind sail.
But this was in the spring. And as I'm getting closer to the fraternity house, I bump into a fraternity brother, and he can tell I'm upset. So he asked what was going on. I told him the story. He said, Ron, you shouldn't even be at the University of Illinois. I said, what do you mean? He said, you should be at Harvard or Princeton or Stanford. I said, what's that? He said, Stanford is the Harvard of the West. He said, they have palm trees. I said, you gotta be kidding me. He said, no, I'm not. He said, put that stuff in your room. Let's go to the library. So we go to the library, and all these big universities have the handbooks from every other university. Pulls down the Stanford handbook, and sure enough, it's Memorial Drive.
Yeah. You
can see Memorial Church at the end, and you see the palm trees. I said, and this place is as good as Harvard? He said, absolutely. He said, and you can get in. I said, how does that work? He said, yeah, just right away for an application. So I said, okay. He said, and as long as you're doing that, you might as well write to Harvard, Yale, and Princeton. I said, okay, so I do that. And then, because of the kind of schedule I had, I contracted mononucleosis.
Yeah.
And I was very sick. I was hospitalized with 105 fever.
Jeez.
And I don't even know how long I was in the hospital, but it was a couple of days. And it was time to take the SATs, which was a requirement at all those schools. So they wouldn't let me out of the hospital. So I called my friend, because they also didn't leave your clothes in the room.
Yeah.
And they smuggled in some clothes. And I just walked out of the hospital. And I went to the room where they're giving the test. And and I'm doing pretty well, I'm moving along. And all of a sudden I see a sort of a mark on the paper. And I think, that's strange, what's that from? Then I hear the next mark. Sweat is pouring off my brow onto the test.
Oh, wow.
My fever must have broken.
Yeah.
So I get up, I go to the proctor, who was a professor, and I explained that I had just checked myself out of the hospital, and I needed to put some cold water on my face and mop myself up a bit. I'm surprised he didn't just run screaming from the room.
Yeah.
Because I was probably contagious.
Yeah.
But he felt bad, let me do that. And I brought some paper towels in the room, finished the exam before everybody else, which is what I would usually do. And then I thanked him. He said, I'm going to write a note with your exam so they'll understand the circumstances. I said, thanks.
Yeah.
And then I actually packed my stuff up, got on the train, because the University of Illinois was in Champaign-Urbana. It was about a 3-hour train ride to Chicago.
Yeah.
And took the train and ended up staying with my mother for 3 or 4 weeks before I was recovered. So I come back to the university, and I'd totally forgotten about this transfer concept. And then one day, a day or two later, the light bulb goes off, and I open up the drawer where I put all the applications.
Yeah.
And I open them one by one. Yale, that's too late.
Yeah.
Harvard, too late. Princeton, too late. Stanford, I still had about 10 days. So I fill out the application quickly, put my photograph in there, mail off my application. That was probably late May, early June. So that summer I was working as a truck helper at Pepsi-Cola in Chicago. And my birthday's in the middle of July. And I was living in a fraternity house at the Illinois Institute of Technology on the South Side, which is a pretty rough neighborhood.
Yeah.
We were there, the fraternity brothers asked us to stay there to protect the fraternity house.
Wow.
There were two of us, but it was free. So I was able to save almost everything I earned for, tuition and stuff. So it's my birthday, and I don't even know how this happened, but someone who worked with my father got the number of the dormitory or fraternity house, called there, and I was there.
Wow.
Pick up the phone, and she says, "I have a letter for you." I said, "Who is it from?" "Stanford." So she said, "You want me to open it?" I said, "Is it fat or is it skinny?" She said, "It's neither. It's sort of in between." I said, "All right, don't open it. I'll come to pick it up." So I didn't have a car.
Yeah.
So I found a cab. I took a cab there. And amazingly, I got in.
Wow.
On my birthday.
Actually, like a little kind of side story. So when you were a Pepsi, you were the one delivering. You were kind of getting the.
Oh yeah, I was on the truck.
And I remember us talking about how when you would do that, and that summer, you got in some really great shape because of the deliveries that you were doing.
Right. So I was probably the biggest of the boys.
Yeah.
So they would give me the inner city routes.
Yes.
And the reason for that is that in the inner city, the liquor stores and the bars, basically the only storage they had was in the basement.
Yeah.
So they'd have these winding metal open staircases.
Wow.
And Pepsi-Cola just introduced the 16-ounce glass bottle. So the little wheelie thing was designed for 12-ounce.
Yep. Wow.
And the drivers were nice. They would give you advice, but then, they were talking to the bartender, writing up the order. Once you were there, it was your job to find whatever it is they had ordered, put it on the little wheelie, bring it inside, take it down the metal staircase, and then bring up the dirty empties. So, first day, driver says, "Kid, I just got one bit of advice for you." I said, "Okay." He said, he explained the staircase. He said, "Now, this happens to everybody. At some point, you're going to lose the load. Don't grab it, because it'll suck you right down the staircase."
Jeez.
I said, "Yes, sir." So, they have skids on the back. So he had to do, I think, 5 cases. So because they were 16 ounces, it was actually above the hand grip.
Jeez.
So you got like this,
Yeah.
not like this. I never lost a bottle because I was really careful. But the worst delivery I ever had to make was a bar that had a Weimaraner, a male. And the bartender said, "Wait, just don't move." I said, "Okay." And he goes through a doorway, and I hear noises. And finally he says, "All right, you can come in." So he's straddling a big male with a 2x4 in the male's mouth. And he's drooling. And he's holding him back so I can bring the Pepsi-Cola through and then go down the staircase. And I had to make 2 round trips. I have to tell you, it toughened me up.
So you had there's what was it, a mob situation? What was that? You don't ask. Yeah, you don't.
Yeah,
This
was the Southside of Chicago.
Totally. Yeah.
Because what I would do, the Illinois Institute of Technology was on a cross street in the 30s, and there was a bus line. And of course, I'd get up, I'd shave, shower, put on my uniform, get on the bus. Now, where I got on the bus, I was the only white guy or girl.
Yeah.
I was one.
Yeah.
And people were nice. I never had a problem, ever. And it would just go due west, and with each about every 2 or 3 blocks, 1 or 2 black people would get off, and then maybe an occasional white person would get on. By the time we get to the plant, the bus was all white.
Yeah, wow, yeah.
So, and then the reverse, of course, was true at the end of the day. But as you said, it was a very physical job. And, I'd get back there and I would just take, I would eat a can of tuna fish and a small helping of cottage cheese.
Yeah.
That was dinner every night. And then I'd go out.
That's cool. I mean, there's so many things that we can spend a long time on, but one of the things I wanted to talk about is the experience, your last job before you really got into law. And this is a time. Was this was after Stanford? Was this when you were in University of Chicago?
Yes, after my first year in law school.
So after your first year in law school, you were. What job did you have?
I was a driver for the Chicago Transit Authority, the CTA, the bus outfit.
Yeah.
So the University of Chicago is on the south side too. It's in the 58th Street or thereabouts.
Yeah.
But that's Hyde Park, which is, there are a fair amount of wealthy people there.
Yeah.
A lot of professors. It's at least in 65 when I was there, 65 to 68, Hyde Park was very nice. And that's where I was born.
Yeah.
In 44. By the middle 60s, I think it was even nicer.
Yeah.
Because we have to look at Michelle Obama's book to see what her view of it was.
Yeah.
But then I thought it was nicer. So the CTA was hiring for drivers for 77th and Vincennes, which is a station that's totally black.
Yeah.
Everyone who lives around there is black because, Chicago, heavily segregated.
Yep.
All the drivers were black. But, didn't make any difference to me. And a friend of mine at the law school told me about the job because, like me, he was on a scholarship, he had work, he had loans.
Yeah.
And so you couldn't get a job in a law firm after your first year. Those days. You can now, but those days they didn't want to talk to you. So I interviewed, got the job. And then, of course, you had to get a license. we both passed, and we're both stationed at 77th and Vincennes. But I have to say, I saw him the last day of class, and I saw him the first day of the second year. I never saw him once at the station, and he kept his job.
Yeah.
I don't know why that happened. So I got to the station. The first thing they tell you is you're going on a split shift. I don't even know what that means. And they can tell. So they explained to me that I'll work, say, from 3 in the afternoon to 7 o'clock at night. And then I get to go home and come back at 11 or 12 and put another couple hours in. I said, fine. It was a lot, because it was a lot of money per hour. So, and because you're a temp, I mean, we were union, but still, you know, in some temporary capacity, it was rare you got the same route twice.
Yeah.
Whoever was sick, you filled in. So, you know, I started basically in June, and then July rolls through, everything's fine, and then it's August, and I'm put on probably one of the most difficult routes that would end. There was a turnaround and the headquarters of the Black Peastone Nation was at the turnaround.
Wow.
It was also a huge elevated stop.
Yeah. And then Peastone Nations, was that like pretty much a gang, like the gang?
It was a gang.
Yeah.
And, you know, they were serious about things.
Yes.
So, you know, when you get a job, they tell you this is what you're doing, Dekoven. You get on the bus and you just do it. It was during the day too.
Yeah.
So, again, when I had started, an older bus driver took me aside out of the blue, and he said, I'm going to tell you a couple of things. I want you to listen, because it may save your life. So I listened. So one of the 3 things he told me was, as you're pulling up to a stop, if you see anyone wearing one of those silk-looking jackets, or if they have a chain around their neck, you keep going. He said, I don't care if there's a 100-year-old lady there with a cane. Don't stop. You're looking for trouble. So that's how I functioned.
Yeah.
And about the middle of this trip, I had already stopped. The doors were open. People were loading in the front. They come in and they put their money in the box.
Yeah.
And I could see the rearview mirror. There were 5 young guys who had been lying down in the grass on the side. They all had jackets. They get up, they go to the back doors, they pry the doors open, and then there's silence on the bus. And they walk to the front. Now, the front of these old CTA buses, the seats were parallel with the windows.
Gotcha.
And then you had normal seating.
Yeah.
So the man in charge, and you could tell he was in charge, because he had a gun. He sits down right behind me. And by then everyone's loaded and I start to take off. And children, put your hands over your ears. He says to me, what's a white motherfucker like you doing in my hood? So I said, I go to school here. He said, school? What kind of school? Law school. In fact, it's right over there. He yells out to the other 4, I just found me my lawyer. After that, he was really nice. We were talking. I don't recall about what. When they get off, he said, if you ever have trouble, you tell him you're a friend of mine.
Yeah.
He gave me his first name. I thanked him. And to prove that they were telling the truth, I had to go, there was no proper turnaround there because it was really a crowded neighborhood.
Yeah.
So you had to go down side streets
Wow.
in a big bus. So I start to go, and I'm halfway down the second street, and the street is blocked by 3 cars. And one of the young guys who had been with him saw it. He comes up, he said, I'll back you out of here. So just watch me. I'll make certain you don't hit anybody.
Yeah.
Because I probably would have been dead if I hit one of their cars.
Yeah, totally.
And I backed the bus out of there. I thanked him, and I then retraced my steps, get back. I think the street was called Stony Island.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure of that. So I now turn south to go back to the terminal, which is the route, and I take the little legend on the top and I roll it to out of service. I drive back to the terminal and pull in, and there's the starter's there, and he says, "What are you doing back here, Dekoven?" I said, "I'm sick." He said, "Well, get out of my bus." So I get out of the bus, go back to my apartment, and all the time I'm thinking about my experience. I shower, I shave, I put on the only suit I own, and I go to the law school. And they had a little office that helped people who needed a job. And as I get there, the lady who ran that office was on a break, and they had a little cork bulletin board. There was one 3x5 card on the bulletin board. It was a small labor law firm who said they needed someone who had taken labor law to come in for 2 weeks, do research, write a memorandum. So I take the pin out of the card, put the card in my pocket, and I get on the train. It's very close to the city. It's like a 12-minute ride. And I walk to this labor law firm, and I present myself, and I say, front end, I haven't had labor law, I'm just starting my second year. However, I'm very good at doing research and writing. I can do this for you. They look at me and they say, well, no one else has come for this job. And I'm thinking, and no one else ever will.
Yeah.
So the job is yours, but remember, you finish the work, that's it. This is not a job that you'll be able to keep. So it's fine. So every day I came in and I had to wear a suit, and the research I was doing was in one room that had no air conditioning, and all the books had no index. Wow. And if there were 5 books in that room, there were 500. These are reports from the NLRB, various arbitrations they've had, but that's considered precedent in labor law.
Yeah.
So I don't even know how I did the research. So I do the research, I write the memorandum, I type it up, I hand it in on the last day, the Friday, and the young partner says, all right, Dekoven, come by on Monday and I'll cut you a check. So I said, thank you. So on Monday I come in again with a suit, and he says, come into my office. I said, is there a problem? He said, no. He said, we really liked your memorandum, and we'd like you to stay for the rest of the summer, and we'd like you to work for us during the school year. He said, you don't need a labor law course. I said, thank you.
Wow.
So that CTA was my last job, my last real job. All the others were lawyer jobs.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah, I was really lucky.
So let's jump ahead a little bit. So what brought you from Chicago to New York?
The reason I went to law school was because I wanted to become a law professor.
Yep.
So I did well in law school, and I published, which are the two requirements
Yeah.
to get a job at a top law school. But for reasons that have nothing to do with my credentials, as it turns out, the woman I was engaged to refused to leave the city of Chicago. That should have been an indication what my life was going to be like with her. And all my offers were, I had an offer from BU, University of Colorado. I had a third offer. It was a tough time. It was 1968,
Yeah.
the middle of the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
The people who were applying to law school, the numbers had dropped. So even the top, well, in particular, the top law schools were not hiring.
Yeah.
But, I was getting offers from decent law schools, but not Northwestern or the University of Chicago.
Yeah.
So I decided that I would instead spend a couple of years practicing law, and then hopefully the war would be over and I could get a job at a major law school. So I took a job in Chicago, and to sort of keep my hand in academics, I learned that there were organizations that provided continuing education for lawyers. So I managed to make it known that I was interested in doing that. And I did quite a lot of that as it was pro bono, but it was fun. All the other people lecturing were very smart.
Yeah.
And I got to know a lot of people I wouldn't otherwise know. And the seminars were all over the country. So and that I didn't have to pay for.
Yeah.
They would pay for transportation and hotel and food. And it was when I was doing that I met a senior partner from Sherman and Sterling. And then not long after that, I was in a big case in Portland. They were on the other side, and I beat them. So it turned out Citibank, who was their principal bank client, told the firm they were understaffed. They needed another partner to handle all the work that Citicorp had. And the guy I beat said, well, what about Ron Dekoven? I know he's good. He beat me in court. Then the other guy said, well, I've heard him lecture. I think he's pretty smart. And that's how I got the job at Sherman and Sterling. I wasn't looking for a job, but I was thinking about making a change. I actually thought I would stay in Chicago.
Yeah.
Because I had no ties outside of Chicago.
Yeah.
Other than Stanford. And I didn't really think the practice of law in California was my cup of tea.
Yeah.
And I was right about that. So in any event, Sherman and Sterling called and invited me to dinner in New York, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah. And we're gonna kind of pull something into the fitness side of things. You've talked about you used to run a lot, especially in those days when you're in New York, and prior to that, what did exercise or what did running do for you during those times?
It was really a way to handle the massive travel.
Yeah.
So this didn't happen immediately, but starting, I guess, in the late 80s, because I moved in 1980. Mm-hmm. But by the late 80s, I was basically an international lawyer. Mm-hmm. So I had cases in Brazil, Argentina, Bermuda, and London. Mm-hmm. So my weekly route was to fly either to BA, wow, or some other location in Latin America, stay overnight. The next night I'd fly back to New York, get in the morning before the flights to Bermuda. So I'd get a charter, go to Bermuda for the day.
Yep.
Wednesday night, there was a BA flight directly to London. So I'd arrive in London on Thursday morning, and then Friday night I would take the second Concorde back to New York. So even though I was pretty young, that's a lot of air travel.
Yeah.
And when I would arrive, there'd be obviously a time difference. I would have spent all that time in an environment that didn't have adequate humidity. Mm-hmm. So the running would snap me out of it. Mm. So I wherever I would get there, and everyone knew this,
yeah, I
would just put on my running gear, run for 35, 40 minutes, do some sit-ups, some push-ups, pull-ups if I could find a bar. And then I'd eat breakfast, generally in my outfit,
yeah,
which I'm sure people loved, take a shower, and then I'd start work.
Yeah.
And that hour to hour and a half between the running and the eating and the shower, that was like magic for me.
Yeah.
And I like, as I said, I would do it, and then I'd do it when I got home. I wouldn't do it Friday night. I'd go out to dinner Friday night, and then on Saturday morning I'd go for a long run.
Yeah.
Longish, not, not by your terms, but longish run.
Yeah. Okay, so you go from Chicago to New York, and London is calling me versus just flying there for being a New York lawyer and working in London for some of your clients. But now you moved to London, and there's a lot of stories that I know there's a lot of stories of how you got to London, but you became a barrister, and that process, I guess, explain that to the novice what a barrister is, because I don't think that a lot of people in the States understand what that is, and then also, how did you become a barrister?
So most people in the United States think that barristers work for Starbucks.
Yes. Yes.
And then I explained that's a barista,
yeah,
not a barrister. So the United Kingdom has what is called a divided bar.
Yeah.
Whereas the United States has a unified bar.
Yeah.
So in a divided bar, the people who speak in court are the barristers.
Yeah.
The people who don't are solicitors.
Gotcha.
And there's a pretty clear line of demarcation between them as to what kind of work each of them do. But what I've just stated is a rough approximation
Yes.
of where the line is. So I decided that I wanted to become a barrister because I'd left Sherman and Sterling in the end of '99 because I had created a startup in New York.
Yeah.
We sold that, and then I told Linda I was going to take the rest of the year off.
And Linda is
my wife.
Your wife.
My then girlfriend.
Yes, your better half, and as we know, we both have better 1 and 2 force. You know, it's for
Definitely.
Sure.
So without going into the story of how London came about, I was looking for sort of more of an academic
Yeah.
career for my next move. And ironically, barristers are very academic
Yes.
because of the way the responsibilities are divided with solicitors.
Mm-hmm.
So it was perfect for me.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it, and I still love it, even though I've cut way back on the amount of time I devote to it in a year. And it also enabled me to do more pro bono work. I wrote model law for a multilateral treaty organization in Rome.
Mm-hmm.
If I'd been a lawyer with
Yeah.
a big firm, they might not have been very happy about that, but I was self-employed.
Yeah.
So when I decided to do something, I could just do it.
Yeah.
So that was fun.
Yeah.
And you know, I truly loved my time there.
Yeah. That's awesome. And then you make your way to Calistoga.
Yep.
And I remember meeting you and Linda. You guys have stayed at Solage, and that's where I met you. But you know what made you guys, you know, really made that commitment that you wanted to make this your kind of permanent space and your permanent home?
Well, for years, I wanted to buy a second home.
Mm-hmm.
Because barristers really only work about 8 months of the year.
Mm-hmm.
When you're a senior barrister, if the courts are closed, there really isn't that much for you to do. I
Yeah.
mean, you can get work,
Yeah.
but you know, my view was, why bother?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we would take these long holidays,
Mm-hmm.
and wherever we went, I would say to Linda, what about here? No. And I won't take you through all the places she said no to.
Yes. Yeah.
But we were at Solage. It was the third year of our visits. And in that third year, we stayed there for a month. And I had stopped asking her about, I figured it would never happen.
Yeah.
And she turned to me and said, would you like to see a real estate agent? I thought, that's a sign. So I said yes. And it didn't happen immediately, but we found this property with help. Well, actually, Linda found it.
Yeah.
The broker didn't find it. And basically, the moment I saw it on the internet, I wanted to buy it.
Yeah.
But she said, you know, maybe you should see it first.
Yeah.
So, and we had just come back from here. So a month later, we flew back and saw the property, and it was even more beautiful than it looked on the internet. So we bought it.
Yeah.
And we intended it as a second home.
Yeah.
But, so we closed on the deal December of 2011. It's now right before Easter of 2012. We're in our London home. It's raining, it's cold.
Yeah.
We're in what the Brits call the lower ground, in other words, the basement.
Yeah.
But in those houses, the basement is a real room.
Yeah.
So, and that's where we had television. Then you walk outside, and there was a garden,
Yeah.
and then the garage. So, you know, I look outside, and it's coming down in buckets, and it's cold. And I said to Linda, who was on her computer, I said, you know, if anyone knew what we owned in California and saw us here, they would say we were stupid. And she turns back to me and says, do you want to sell? And I said, yes. That's how we made the decision.
Wow.
To move here full time.
Wow. That's cool. So we're going to kind of talk a little bit about some fitness related things and some nutrition related things. Like I said, we've been working together since 2012, and you know, we've kind of gone through different iterations of, you know, getting stronger and using the weights. What has made, why did you want to have a personal trainer, and why did you want to focus on having consistent training?
I view the training as being integral to a happy life.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when I was younger, I didn't have a trainer, and every workout was identical.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, I was able to get away with that because I was very fit, and you know, I've been working out. I mean, I started working out when I was 12.
Yeah.
When I bought my first weight set. But you know, even through my time at Sherman and Sterling, I was still doing my own thing. When we got to London, we actually created a gym in our house.
Yeah.
And Linda found a trainer, and who we're still friendly with.
Yes, yeah.
As I think you know. And he was terrific. He would show up 6:30 in the morning, which in London is like the middle of the night, because you know, it's so dark. And you know, to go out when it's dark and rainy and cold, I mean, you have to be Superman to train under those circumstances.
Yeah.
If it's in your own home, it's not so terrible. So you know, you just brush your teeth and put on your shorts and walk downstairs, open the door, and you start to train.
Yeah.
And he was very good. He had done a fair amount of professional sports training, and like you, he figured out, you know, what was the best way to deal with me at that time, and Linda, because I'm trying to think. So this would have been 2005, so 15 years ago. So I was 60.
Yeah.
So, you know, I was in pretty good shape for a 60-year-old.
Yep.
And we had a lot of equipment, and a lot of free weights. So I always had a complete workout.
Yeah.
I can't even remember. We had a treadmill, we had a rower, we had a, you know,
elliptical or?
Yeah, an elliptical. Maybe that was it, or maybe I'm missing one other. We didn't take any of it with us because it was all set up for the UK.
Yeah.
We actually gave it away, which was Not the smartest thing ever, but we did. So once I had that experience, there was no question we were going to try to find a trainer here. In addition to the obvious and sort of keeping yourself reasonably well fit, you make a commitment to your trainer that you're going to show up.
Yeah.
And that is a very positive thing. Otherwise, you can easily go down the slippery slope of, going to Bella's and spending the morning eating Danish and drinking coffee.
Yeah.
It's okay to do that after you work out.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of finding someone who you're comfortable working with, because I think working out is critical to health.
Yeah. It's one of the things that nutrition is kind of a big part of that, and lately you've been doing what we call the Hugh Jackman diet. And if you can explain to the folks what the Hugh Jackman diet is, and why do you feel it's been helpful for you?
So it's a pretty simple diet. Basically, you on the program, you have, for every 24-hour segment, you have 8 hours where you're free to eat whatever you're going to eat.
Yeah.
But for 16, it's a fast.
Yeah.
So what I found is the most sort of comfortable approach is to get up in the morning. You can drink black coffee, no sugar, and you can have some dairy.
Yeah.
I don't. I just drink it black, and then usually, I work out.
Yeah.
And then I have work to do.
Yeah.
So it's not difficult to wait until noon for my first food, even though I do love eating breakfast.
Yeah.
I've managed to deal with it. And so I'll have lunch, then sometimes I'll have a snack at 3 o'clock, an orange or something, and then we'll eat dinner. But by 8 o'clock at night, you close down.
Yeah.
And that's not difficult. And we feed Tina usually at 5 or 5:30. We eat at between 6 and 7.
Yeah.
And by 8 o'clock, we're off watching Mrs. Maisel.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. And kind of one more fitness kind of related thing, and then kind of move to another topic is, over the last several years, we've kind of got into doing, especially during the season of summer and early spring, getting into the pool and doing aqua workouts. And that's moving away from, we still do the weights, we still do cardio in some conventional ways, but what's kind of the thing that what do you really like about the aqua situation and the workouts?
So before I give you that answer, I will confess that I view pool workouts as something that old ladies do.
Yeah.
So whenever it first came up as a possibility, I thought, well, that's going to be a waste of time.
Yeah.
Of course, I was wrong.
Yeah.
The reason that the aqua workout is so amazing is that when you finish, you feel spectacular.
Yeah.
It's just being in the water creates a feeling that can't be replicated if you're doing a normal workout.
Yeah.
And I look forward to, now we do it on Wednesdays. I look forward to it every week.
Yeah.
It's spectacular. And I think it ends up training different muscles than would be trained in a conventional workout.
Yeah.
So that's good too.
Yeah, totally. Since you've been here, and even in your past, I mean, like I was, looking at and us talking about this, you have done a lot of charity work, and outside of that, your tech startups, there's usually somebody over the age of 75 is not starting into a startup. Usually. And I think with our conversation, you're not the usual. So, what does pay it forward mean to you?
I think it's a way of saying thank you to all the people who have helped me in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sometimes when you're young, you might not understand how special the help is.
Yeah.
And you might not have been properly appreciative.
Mm-hmm.
And sadly, by the time you recognize that, the people who've helped you are dead.
Yeah.
And so by doing similar things for younger people, hopefully it's a way to get the scale back in balance.
Yeah. Yeah. And wow, because there's so many stories, and I wish we had more time to kind of go through it. But when you kind of look back at, where you grew up, we even go too deep into your family situation and everything, and that wasn't the easiest, but you have all these situations, and like even just of what we talked about today, and even more stuff that I know, you listen to the old man, you listen to people who were giving you advice. There's also a story, maybe our second go around, we can talk about the story about the sorority that helped you out when you were, how old were you when that happened?
In DC?
In DC.
Probably, it was the summer of 65, so I turned 21 that summer.
Yeah. And so, I think the important thing is, like, within that is I forget the saying, but, the wisdom to listen to those who have done things before you, and also listen to that advice. I feel like there has been so many different things of you traveling just to get to Stanford. Like I said, there's so many stories. We will have to do another round to kind of talk about that. But now the things you've accomplished, you're now at a level where you're doing the things you're doing with the law tech. What do you want your legacy to be? Or what do you hope people see when they look back at your career and what you've done?
It's a tough question because, as you know, I don't spend a lot of time looking back.
Yes.
However, I had an experience at lunch in Singapore about 2 years ago with an amazing man. A man who's probably the most distinguished lawyer in Singapore. And he told me the answer to your question.
Yeah.
Towards the end of the lunch, he said, how can I help you while you're here?
And let's put purpose. Who was this individual? What was his? Because I think that needs some clarity also.
This man is a former Supreme Court Justice in Singapore. He sits on the board of the Central Bank of Singapore.
Mm-hmm.
He was formerly the Attorney General of Singapore.
Oh.
And he's now functioning as an English barrister. He is a Singapore barrister,
Yeah.
but he is with one of the very best sets of English barristers in London.
Yeah.
And he has a group in Singapore he's running. And he was making himself clear that whatever help I needed, he was prepared to offer if he could. And I must have looked a little surprised because candidly, I wouldn't have asked for help. I know him and I've spent time with him, but not a lot over the years. And he said, Ron, you need to understand why I've offered this to you. So I smiled and I said, I would like to know that. And he said, I've looked at your CV. And he said, you have the most amazing career of any lawyer I know.
Yeah.
I was.
That's one high compliment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's my answer.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. Let's one more question. Kind of tell me a little bit about your current companies, and then I'll let you ask me a couple of questions.
Fair enough.
All right.
So the right way to answer your question is to sort of pull them all together. Otherwise, it's too long an answer. I came up with an idea that I thought would help the English bar, and I wanted to do it because of how kind they'd been to me.
Yeah.
Although I never intended telling them why I was doing it.
Yeah.
I think the best way to pay it forward is to just do it. So I created a company in London, and we have helped a large number of English barristers, and we continue to.
Yeah.
And basically, we provide the most important thing that a practicing lawyer requires. We give them clients.
Yeah.
And we do it using digital advertising and optimization of our website and all, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And we literally invented this approach. Now I don't know how many companies are doing it, but we're still recognized as sort of the Mercedes-Benz of the group.
Yeah.
And on a pretty regular basis, we get unsolicited, really nice comments.
Yeah.
So from there, although this wasn't my plan, I had another idea for lawyers in general.
Yeah.
And by then they were discussing Brexit, and I decided that I wouldn't start another company in London. So I did some diligence. It was between Sydney, Hong Kong, and Singapore. Luckily, I didn't pick Hong Kong.
Yes. Yes.
So we created a company in Singapore, and in the beginning, just to sort of get our feet wet, we started doing the same thing we were doing in London, but that wasn't the game plan. The secret plan was to create software that would essentially open up the globe to all lawyers, not just lawyers who are rich and in big fancy law firms.
Yeah.
I wanted to level the playing field, because in my experience, I've met a lot of lawyers who don't have my credentials, not practicing in a big fancy firm, but who are fabulous.
Yeah.
And I wanted to try to do something to lift them up.
Yeah.
At a price point that was really low.
Yeah.
And that's what high quality software can do.
Yeah.
So we started this, maybe 4 years ago. And next month, we're releasing software that will enable a sole practitioner all the way up to big law firm to literally have a custom app with their name on it and the colors from their website and the typeface from their website that will allow them to video conference and not have hackers involved.
Yeah.
Because of the security of our app.
Yeah.
Also very secure messaging with double encryption, and they'll be able to put their firm name and their credentials on our global website, which will bring them work, and it's going to cost them $15 per lawyer per month.
That's incredible.
You know, an app like this, if a firm wanted to design it, would be 7 figures. I mean, that's what we've spent on it over the last several years. And the great thing about doing it through a hub like our company is that we can raise the capital. We have spectacular developers. And then, because of the scale that we're able to achieve, we can price it out so it's, you know, like a big latte at Starbucks.
Yeah.
Especially in Singapore, it would be $15.
Yeah.
Here it's a little cheaper. Maybe it's 2 lattes here.
Yeah.
But, you know, what lawyer can't afford to spend $15?
Yeah.
And then think about the bragging rights. You get a new client. Oh, I'd like you to download the Almond and Dekoven app. What?
Yeah.
Yeah, just go to Mylawyer. I'll send you the link, and you know, we'll communicate that way, whether it's video conferencing or texting or sending documents. We'll give them a gigabyte of cloud storage for free.
Yeah. Wow.
And then if they want more, we do not profit from the cloud storage. We charge them what Google charges us.
Yeah.
So there's no hidden charges. We will do great at $15 a head per month.
That's cool. That's really cool. Well, thank you again for having the talk. And do you have any questions for me?
I do. I hold you in very high regard. I think the way that you've gone about creating your own company is amazing. And I debated telling you in advance what my question was going to be.
Yeah.
But I forgot, so I apologize.
Okay.
My question is this. Looking back over the past few years, can you identify 3 things that you've learned while becoming an absolutely first-class entrepreneur?
So ask that again. And then I want to soak it in, and then I'm going to give you the answer. So 3 things.
3 things that you've learned in the process of becoming a first-class entrepreneur.
Yeah, there's definitely being an entrepreneur is humbling. So that is definitely something. But I would say the things that I've learned is that I feel like you can truly affect change being an entrepreneur. And I think it's very similar to what you said as being a barrister, of you can say no. You know, I don't say no that often, but you can say no and you can really be focused on the thing that you're trying to accomplish. And that's something I learned, and you don't fully get and understand until you become an entrepreneur. I think the other thing that you learn is that respect the process, continue to respect it. And within that process is have a partner by your side that's willing to work just as hard as you, but sometimes even more. I think we've both succeeded in that lane.
We're fortunate.
Yeah, and so that part is what I've learned, is that our success, I do think I could have been successful without my partner, but I can't be as happy and successful, without her. So I know that she balances me out along with the kids, and then the other thing, I kind of already had this, but I always kind of come back to it. It's something kind of within the process, is that being consistent to the point that people can count on you. It's kind of going through that part of it of like, even when the expectation's on you, can you still deliver? And if you do some of the basics as an entrepreneur and you just show up, some of it just showing up, you're already ahead of the game. Because a lot of people just don't show up, So those are some of the few things I've learned.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was insightful.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions?
Nope.
All right.
Since it was a three-parter, I thought that was enough.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, this has been really amazing. Thank you again for joining me on Trainers Talks. And I think we'll have to, do this again and maybe go through some more stories, because there's a well of stories, and I feel like we were in a 2-foot swimming pool today on some of the stories that you had, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week. But this one was a treasure. Thank you again.
Thanks, Coach.